The world is choked by the tragic death of MIT's top fusion scientist, Nuno Loureiro, gunned down in his own home, his life's work on the edge of changing everything. But what if I told you this isn't just a story about one man? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a pattern that's haunted inventors for over a century. Breakthroughs in energy, medicine, and technology met not with celebration but with sabotage, ruin, and sometimes death. You're not crazy for questioning this, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Let's get into it. Here's what we're diving into tonight: the shocking murder of MIT's fusion director Nuno Loureiro in December 2025. The chilling pattern of inventors who get too close to free energy and end up dead, ruined, or erased from history. The evidence, the cover-ups, and what it all means. Because this isn't just about one scientist. It's about a system that seems terrified of anyone who threatens the status quo. We're going to look at the stories of Nikola Tesla, T. Henry Moray, Lester Hendershot, Francisco Pacheco, Charles Pogue, and more. Each one had a breakthrough. Each one was met with tragedy. Let's break it down. On December 15, 2025, Nuno Loureiro, director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, was shot multiple times in the foyer of his Brookline, Massachusetts apartment. He was rushed to the hospital but died the next morning. No suspects, no motive, no details from police. Just silence. But here's what you need to know. Loureiro wasn't just any scientist. He was leading the world's most advanced fusion research, work that could make fossil fuels, oil pipelines, and even nuclear plants obsolete. Fusion energy is the holy grail, clean, limitless, and decentralized. And every time someone gets close to making it real, the world gets dangerous. The question is this just a random tragedy, or is it part of something bigger? To answer that, we need to look at history. Let's zoom out. Loureiro's death isn't an isolated tragedy. It's the latest in a long, chilling pattern. Here's what I've dug up so you don't have to, and here's why it matters. In the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla, the father of alternating current, wireless power, and free energy, died broke and alone. His papers were seized by the government. In the 1920s and 30s, T. Henry Moray built a device that pulled energy from the sea of energy around us. He was shot at, sabotaged, and died in obscurity. Lester Hendershot's fuelless generator was tested by the U.S. Army Air Corps. It worked, but his backers died in mysterious accidents, and he was forced to sign over his rights. Francisco Pacheco invented a hydrogen generator that could run cars on seawater. He was ignored, threatened, and died before his work could be commercialized. Charles Pogue's carburetor could get 200 miles per gallon. His workshop was broken into, his prototype stolen, and he was forced to sell out. Dozens more: Archie Blue, Russell Burke, Bob Thiel. Each with a breakthrough, each met with sabotage, threats, or mysterious death. What do they all have in common? They threatened the system. They offered something that couldn't be controlled. Let's start with the most famous name on this list, Nikola Tesla. Tesla's inventions, alternating current, wireless power, the Tesla coil, laid the foundation for the modern world. He held over 700 patents. He was arguably the greatest inventive genius of the 20th century. But when he began to talk about free energy, about pulling power from the very fabric of space, the doors began to close. In the late 1890s, Tesla moved his operations to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to test his new ideas. He built a high-voltage laboratory on a hillside cow pasture. Inside was the world's largest Tesla coil. His experiments were truly dramatic. Thunder reverberated for at least 15 miles when he fired up the electrical discharges. His massive coils discharged more than 12 million volts at a burst and threw electric sparks of more than 100 feet in length. The townspeople sometimes thought his laboratory was on fire. The ground under their feet was so highly charged that spectators at a distance from the laboratory would see tiny sparks between their heels and the sandy soil when they walked. Half a mile away, horses would get a shock from their metal horseshoes and would bolt in panic. Tesla was convinced that free energy was a fact, not mere speculation. He predicted that people would someday hook their machinery up to the very wheelworks of nature, the energy of vacuum space. But then came J.P. Morgan. Morgan had funded Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, designed to transmit electricity wirelessly. But when Morgan realized there would be no way to put a meter on free energy, no way to charge people for it, he pulled out. Tesla's lab was burned to the ground. His notes and blueprints were stolen. His Wardenclyffe Tower was dynamited in 1917, not by the government as some legends would have it, but torn down to be sold as scrap metal. Tesla died broke, alone in a New York hotel. The FBI seized his papers. To this day, much of his work remains classified. As Gene Manning writes, "What a tragedy that a genius of such magnitude should die broke in his room at the New Yorker hotel." For some time afterward, the FBI was quite interested in his papers, some of which dealt with new kinds of torpedoes, death rays, and other inventions too numerous to mention here. Tesla himself said, "Electric power is everywhere, present in unlimited quantities, and can drive the world's machinery without the need of coal, oil, gas, or any other fuels." But the world never got to see it. Now let's talk about T. Henry Moray. Moray was a self-taught scientist from Salt Lake City, Utah. In the late 1920s, he was a confident 33-year-old engineer with a young family and a gift to give humanity. That gift was his radiant energy, invention, a device that, as he saw it, converted power from the cosmos, from rays which constantly pierced the earth from all directions. Despite his self-confidence, there were hints that he might be stopped from mass-producing his device. His family was harassed by mysterious threats. "Your husband's life is not worth a plugged nickel unless he cooperates on radiant energy," an anonymous caller told Ella Moray over the telephone. Their home was repeatedly broken into when the family was away, as if in warnings of worse to come. But the young man believed in his dream and expected that the world would accept his discovery. In October 1926, Moray and a group of businessmen drove 26 miles from the nearest power line to a desolate area near Strawberry Lake in Utah. They set up his equipment, a brown container about the size of a butter box, another slightly smaller box, and a fiberboard box containing mysterious tubes. After tuning the device for about 10 minutes, Moray put the key into the post, and a 100-watt light bulb burned brightly for 15 minutes. The light was even without fluctuations. While the light was burning, Moray disconnected the antenna lead-in wire from the apparatus, and the light went out. He connected it again and the light appeared. He also disconnected the ground wire and the light went out. Moray said he could do the same thing in the middle of the Sahara Desert or in the deepest mine. By 1939, a unit weighing less than 55 pounds, including its wooden case, converted 50,000 watts of power, enough to run a small factory. But then came the sabotage. A man named Felix Fraser, who had been sent by the Rural Electrical Administration to work in Moray's lab, went crazy with a sledgehammer one day and destroyed the radiant energy machine. He had not broken into the lab. He had been hired to work there. John Moray, T. Henry's son, later wrote, "As a result of the constant threat to his life, my father carried a gun with him at all times. He carried a .32 in his pocket. And whenever he walked from the house to the laboratory at night, he would wear a .32.20 revolver. He was an excellent shot in the old Western sense. On 3 different occasions, he was attacked at his laboratory and shot his way out of the situation. On March 2, 1940, Moray was attacked in his laboratory. He was hit on the shoulder, struggled with his assailant, and was shot in the leg. A second man rushed up with a gun. Moray kicked the second man, knocking his gun free. A third gunman fired from a distance. Moray returned fire, knocking the third gunman down. Bleeding severely, Moray knew he would faint at any moment. He told the men to get out, pretending he had not recognized any of them. John Moray later wrote, "He was immediately fired upon again by someone at a distance. He returned the fire, knocking the third gunman down. A fourth man rushed up to help the wounded gunman." Henry recognized this man as Felix Fraser, the same man who had smashed his device with a sledgehammer. Moray's family suffered as a result of the mysterious opposition to his work. Mrs. Ella Moray lived in fear that something would happen to one of the children. The children were forbidden to go anywhere by themselves. Even when the boys were almost teenagers, they could not go out without an escort because of the threat of a kidnapping. Moray's closest friend, W.H. Lovesey of Utah Oil Refining Company, died under mysterious circumstances in a one-car accident. A hitchhiker who was never identified walked away from the crash. Moray died in 1974, his invention never commercialized, his legacy nearly erased. Lester Hendershot was an inventor who, in his many attempts at producing practical items, had a moderate success a few times with electronic toys. But his biggest idea was so revolutionary that it embarrassed the nation's top scientists because they couldn't explain it. His invention was called a motor by the newspapers, but it was actually a generator powered by the magnetic field of the Earth. His later models created enough electricity to simultaneously light a 120-volt light bulb and a table model radio. His son Mark witnessed it furnishing the power to run a television set and a sewing machine for hours at a time in their living room. It was in 1927 and 1928 that Hendershot began to think seriously about this fuel-less generator. The first significant experiments were held at Selfridge Field, Detroit, under the direction of Major Thomas G. Lanphier, commandant of the field and leader of the First Pursuit Group. William B. Stout, president of the Stout Air Service Inc. and designer of the all-metal type plane used by the Ford Motor Company, said, "The demonstration was very impressive. It was actually uncanny. I would like very much to see a large model designed to develop enough power to lift an airplane." Major Lanphier's comments to reporters after the demonstrations were, "The whole thing is so mysterious and startling that it has the appearance of being a fake. I was extremely skeptical when I saw the first model, but I helped to build the second one and witnessed the winding of the magnet. I am sure there was nothing phony about it." Hendershot had first shown the military brass how his model worked. Then he supervised Army technicians in building their own model, which worked perfectly. Major Lanphier said that the electrical men to whom they had shown the motor laughed at the way we wired it up and said it wouldn't work. Then it did work. But then, as suddenly as it all started, the publicity and sensationalism of the Hendershot motor stopped. The last news story to appear was on March 10, 1928, when a small article appeared in most papers saying that Lester Hendershot was a patient in emergency hospital in Washington. His son Mark later wrote, "Something happened during this period that could explain the actions of Dr. Hochstetter and his associates. My father said that while he was in the hospital, he was approached by a large corporation to stop his activity in connection with the motor or generator. Until the day he died, he would not reveal the name of the company, only that if he were successful with his generator, it would be a serious threat to their multi-million-dollar industry. He named the sum he accepted as $25,000, and the condition was that he was not to build another unit for 20 years. That's when he dropped out of sight." Mark Hendershot also wrote, "My father admitted that he and the family lived in constant fear, as we were being contacted every so often by crackpots who had delved into the records and discovered his creation and had gone to the trouble of searching him out. Some of them, he suspected, were representatives of subversive groups and/or foreign powers. On April 19, 1961, upon returning home from school, Mark found his father dead. It was recorded as a suicide without any further investigation. Francisco Pacheco's patent for his invention could have revolutionized the field of energy. The Pacheco bipolar autoelectric hydrogen generator was a unique system which separated hydrogen from seawater as it was needed for use. Hydrogen is the cleanest burning fuel. When burned, its waste is clean water vapor which can either be recycled back in the system for reuse or safely released into the environment and returned to the oceans, lakes, and rivers. No greenhouse gases, no atomic pollution, no acid rain, no crippling dependencies on foreign oil. Pacheco built prototypes which successfully fueled a car, a motorcycle, a lawnmower, a torch, and a boat, with the ocean serving as its inexhaustible fuel tank. Another prototype system energized an entire home in West Milford, New Jersey, providing electric energy and fuel for cooking and heating. As a young man in his native country, Bolivia, Pacheco was fascinated with the idea of developing a super battery. While experimenting in his makeshift laboratory, he lit a match, and the bubbles forming in one of the beakers ignited and blew a hole in the ceiling. He knew that he had made a discovery, but was not sure what he had discovered. In 1943, while on a goodwill tour of South America, the Vice President of the United States witnessed the Pacheco generator running an automobile. He invited Pacheco to bring the generator to Washington, where, later that year, he demonstrated it to scientists and representatives from the U.S. War Department at the Bureau of Standards. He applied for a patent, but because the United States was at war, all patents were sealed and available only to the military. Later, he was advised to shelve his patents because, at that time, oil was plentiful and cheap and there was no need to develop an alternative source of energy. In 1974, with the hopes of acquiring government backing, Pacheco demonstrated his pollution-free hydrogen fuel cell to Congressman Robert Rowe. With no outside power source, the self-taught chemical engineer connected the fuel cell to an alternator unit with a 3-horsepower, 1,000-watt generator with a 4-stroke engine. The demonstration was a success, and the excited congressman promised to bring it to the attention of Washington officials. Upon leaving Rose Patterson office, Pacheco invited him to participate in another demonstration at the Jersey Shore, the first powerboat ride fueled by seawater. Many newspapers were invited as well. But Rowe never showed up, nor did very many newspapers. History was made on July 27, 1974, when a 26-foot inboard powerboat ran for 9 hours using the Pacheco generator and seawater for fuel, putting back into the ocean as its waste clean water. In 1980, Pacheco was contacted by 60 Minutes, who promised to help him show his invention to millions of Americans. The 60 Minutes crew arrived in West Milford and taped the generator producing hydrogen fuel for a Bunsen burner and for a torch which cut through a 3-4-inch thick steel plate indoors. The hydrogen gas inflated a balloon and produced energy to run an electric motor. The last of his demonstrations involved running a lawnmower with the fuel. Because he was going to be on television at the last minute, he decided to buy a new one and did not have time to test it out. The engine choked due to the excessive amount of gas being produced, but the 60 Minutes crew assured him that they had enough material to present an entire show with the successful demonstrations. Later, when the show was aired, Pacheco was devastated as the show had a completely different focus. The only demonstration aired was the lawnmower, and it was used to provide an example of an independent inventor's non-working invention. Pacheco died in 1992, his invention never commercialized. Charles Pogue knew that the most explosive part of gasoline is its vapor, and so invented a system that would induct the vapor from the airspace above the fuel in a gasoline tank. He was thus able to get more than 200 miles per gallon on 2-ton cars with 8-cylinder engines. Pogue held 3 basic patents for vaporizing carburetors he developed for General Motors in the 1930s. With such an outstanding outcome, one would think that these devices would be standard on today's automobiles. Unfortunately for us, Pogue's facilities were destroyed in the late 1930s and he was wounded by gunfire in incidents that persuaded him to forego further development of his invention. From the Manitoba, Canada newspapers, January 24, 1936. If a car weighing 1.5 tons will run 1.5 miles on a drop and a half of gasoline, people are very likely to forget the famous hen and a half who laid an egg and a half in a day and a half. Loss of 3 models of his 200-mile-per-gallon carburetor was reported by C.N. Pogue. Thieves broke into his workshop, located in the amphitheater rink, through a hole in the roof and escaped undetected. Pogue believed that the robbers did not take the 3 carburetors. They stole for any financial gain. He was of the opinion that their object was to discourage the inventor and his backer W.J. Holmes to such an extent that they would be willing to sell their rights. A previous attempt to steal the carburetor in April of that year was unsuccessful. At that time, thieves stole a car in which the invention had been demonstrated from a garage at the rear of the amphitheater. Fortunately, the carburetor had been removed from the car some time before. The invention was tested officially in December. In below-zero weather, 2 prominent Winnipeg automobile men, W.S. Kickley and T.G. Breen, reported 209.6 miles to the gallon. In another test made by Pogue himself in February, a car equipped with this carburetor is said to have traveled from Winnipeg to Vancouver on less than 15 gallons of gasoline. T.G. Breen, president of Breen Motor Company Limited, wrote, "I made a test today of the Pogue carburetor installed on a Ford 8-cylinder coupe. The speedometer showed that this car had already run over 9,000 miles. I drove this car 23.2 miles on 1 pint of gasoline. The temperature was averaging round 0 with a strong north wind blowing. The performance of the car was 100% in every way. I tested for acceleration, getaway from a standing start, and at all speeds, and it performed equal to, if not better than, any car with a standard carburetor." But Pogue was eventually forced to sell out. His invention was buried. What do all these stories have in common? Breakthroughs that could change the world, energy, transportation, medicine, inventors who are ignored, ridiculed, sabotaged, or worse, a system that protects its own power at any cost. This isn't just about one invention or one era. It's a pattern, a century-long war on anything that threatens the status quo. And the casualties are not just the inventors. They're all of us. And now, the cycle repeats. Nuno Loureiro, MIT's fusion director, shot dead in his own home. No suspects, no motive, no answers, just silence. But the pattern is clear. Every time someone gets too close to real power, the world gets dangerous. And the story is always the same.